Hello, I'm Janessa. Welcome to my channel. In this video, we are doing an astrology preview of the full moon in Gemini for Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. This is going to be similar to the new moon in Sagittarius video I did as well for December 19th. So just a quick analysis so we can get an idea of what themes might pop up with this full moon energy. The full moon in Gemini happening on December 4th. And for the record, I'm recording this on Monday, December 1st. So just a few days before. I know there's been a lot going on recently with unsealing and documents and lots of information coming to the surface. I really feel like this whole week leading up to the full moon in Gemini, that will continue because Gemini is a sign that's ruled by Mercury. It's all about information and details, a little bit of gossip, lots of conversation for sure, and trying to manage our emotional responses to that information. I did a whole other video for the full moon in Gemini, which I'll link here if you're curious about how to take this information and apply it to your own chart. And this will be an example for educational purposes, maybe a little bit of entertainment as well, for how you can take that information and apply it to a specific person. So let's get into it. I'm putting Blake Lively's chart in the middle, then the Gemini full moon around it. We'll look at them one at a time. And you'll see here Blake Lively is Leo rising, which means, according to whole sign houses, which is the system that I use, that the full moon in Gemini is occurring in her 11th house. So the moon will be at 13 degrees of Gemini, the sun will be at 13 degrees of Sagittarius, exactly opposite in her 5th house. So automatically, if we just take the basics of astrological analysis, we can piece together how an emotional experience around a lot of information, right? Emotional experience is the moon. Gemini is connected to a lot of information, a lot of stories, lots of data coming up in her 11th house, which specifically deals with groups of people. This could be professional networks and organizations. I know there's been some talk about, her producer credit and SAG and the PGA mark, all of these things. These are just examples of professional organizations and groups. So could something come up around that? I don't know. But in addition to professional networks, this could also just be social media or digital networks in general, networks of friends, and also the 11th house is specifically tied to what's called alliances with powerful people. Now, isn't this interesting that we've had a lot come out recently through various documents being unsealed around the role of Taylor Swift, Hugh Jackman, other powerful people in Hollywood, and how involved or not involved they were in everything that's gone down, not just with the lawsuit, but we're talking going all the way back, even to the time period before filming actually commenced for the movie It Ends With Us. So you may have your own opinion about that. I mean, what do you think about the role of Taylor Swift, Hugh Jackman, these other people who've been listed in materials that have been presented to the court? I think a lot of them have been presented by the Wayfair parties. So really interesting that this is all coming to the surface in the lead up to the full moon in Gemini in her 11th house. Also keep in mind though, because this is a full moon, the sun being in Sagittarius in her 5th house, that's going to activate specific themes around experiences of a sensual or sexual. Again, I don't know if YouTube dings me for saying sexual nature. And I think the main connection to me that I can see, I mean, feel free to let me know in a comment below if you see something else, is that this is the core piece of her SH claims. So what clarity, I mean, the sun brings in illumination, what clarity could come to the surface about some of these claims that she has. Now, I also have a working theory just because I've been covering this case for a long time. I know other people who work with astrology are starting to pick up on this case and talk more about it. For the record, I started talking about it in January of this year. And as I've been tracking it from January till now, it seems like there's a correlation between events with the sun involved and court orders, court documents, things from the judge. So could there also be something come up as far as a ruling from the judge? We'll just have to wait and see. Now, specific to Blake Lively's chart, that's just the full moon and how it's activating her 11th and her 5th. But also keep in mind that there are some transits very specific to her birth chart in addition to that. So the moon and the sun being at 13 degrees of Gemini and Sagittarius, they're squaring off with this full moon event with the south node at 13 degrees of Virgo and the north node at 13 degrees of Pisces. And how this connects to Blake Lively's chart very specifically is that she has her natal moon at 12 degrees of Virgo. So that's activating that part of her chart, her second house, which pertains to her own assets, her own money, her own resources, the money she has coming in, as well as the money she has going out. Now, I don't know what's been shared publicly around some of these things recently, but I just want to highlight that as a possibility that this is a direct tie to the moon, which is a more sensitive, vulnerable point in our charts, and her second house of money, income, and assets. But in addition to that, let's go back to her 5th house, because this is the one where I'm like, okay, I really want to mention this because it has some connections to Justin Baldoni's chart, which we'll take a look at. Notice how Mars will be at 22 degrees of Sagittarius on December 4th with the full moon in Gemini, which means it is conjoining her natal Uranus at 22 degrees. Uranus is the planet of the unanticipated, the unexpected, what is disruptive potentially, or innovative, depending on how you look at it. It can bring in a little bit of that like shock and awe element. So this really intrigues me just because it could introduce something unexpected, something that maybe she hasn't been able to foresee, other people haven't been able to foresee. And what's really noteworthy is that if we go to Justin Baldoni's chart here, I'm going to put his in the middle. Whoops, put his in the middle. There we go. And the Gemini full moon around his chart, he's also having an activation of his natal Uranus. So we're getting it from both people, this activation of Uranus, of what's unexpected, what's unanticipated. And for him, it's not Mars that's forming the conjunction like in Blake Lively's chart, it's the sun. Could this be related to something with the judge, something else? I don't know. The sun just generally brings in a little bit more of that objective light. And so for him, the sun at 13 degrees of Sagittarius that day will conjoin his natal Uranus at 12 degrees of Sagittarius in his 4th house. So keep in mind that for Justin Baldoni, now we'll start to broaden our perspective. The full moon is happening in Gemini in his 10th house, and the sun will be in his 4th house. So this is pulling in this oppositional energy, this tension between his 4th house of private matters, home, family, things like that. What's also potentially been a little bit more secret or hidden versus his 10th house, which is more visible. It's connected to career, it's connected to public reputation. So what information could come to the surface? We'll just have to see. But notice how the moon is pretty close to his natal north node at 14 degrees of Gemini. I don't know if it's close to his midheaven, his MC. This is just a random time to put his chart as an ascendant in the sign of Virgo until Justin Baldoni tells me his birth time. I won't know for sure exactly where these angles are. But we can say that the moon at 13 degrees of Gemini is getting close to that natal north node for him, which represents what he is being invited to evolve into and grow into in this lifetime. Something else I'd call attention to is how that same day, Venus at 5 degrees of Sagittarius, it will earlier in the day form a sextile with his natal sun at 4 degrees of Aquarius. So this is interesting because this introduces a decision point, a choice point. It's a little bit of a subtle energy, and it's connecting that 4th house of home, family. But as we see with this case, maybe it's something private with the case or something that's been more concealed. And it's a decision point or a choice point specifically activating his 6th house where his sun is, which is workplace relationships. But even more specific than that, people who report to him, people he's hired. And this is really important because I've been talking about the December 9th date for Justin Baldoni for a while. And this full moon in Gemini on December 4th seems like it's leading into maybe some sort of culmination for him on December 9th when Pluto in Aquarius in his 1st house will square off with his natal Pluto in Scorpio in his 3rd house. And there's also been a lot of chatter recently in relationship to court documents and I think a lot of conversations on Reddit around the people that Justin Baldoni hired to manage this situation for him. We're talking about the PR folks, specifically Melissa Nathan, Katie Case, Jed Wallace. These are people that he's hired to manage this for him. And because of Venus and its involvement on and around this date, I would lean towards, maybe this has something more to do with the women that he hired. Of course, Blake Lively technically is someone that he hired as well. But all in all, I think that this creates a situation where a lot of information could be churned up, not just on December 4th, but also during that critical time period between the full moon and this Pluto square going exact for him. And the thing about full moon in Gemini is, yes, there could be a lot of information, a lot of details, a lot of things coming to the surface. But we need to remember to emotionally regulate, to not necessarily run after all of these details and get stuck in the weeds. There could be the need to also take a step back and look at the bigger picture, especially, and this is now just in my opinion, not only based on the astrology, but especially in what seems like a situation where there are many different stories. And the PR influence in this case, I know that's been one of the biggest things that has been an eye-opener for me, is the role of public relations and how public relations seems to be a battle of stories, a battle of narratives, a battle of words. So something I would suggest, take it or leave it, to keep in mind around this full moon in Gemini with whatever comes up. Gather information, gather data, observe, stay curious, but don't necessarily get attached to any particular story because it can take time to organize that information into a coherent timeline, a coherent structure, a coherent understanding of what actually happened. That's what I've got for you as far as the astrology preview. If you're curious as well, I also put out a forecast for the month of December, specific horoscopes for the month of December for all 12 rising signs, and my membership is now live. So if you are interested in supporting me, getting early access to content and content exclusive to members, click the join button to see more information about your options there. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to connecting again soon.